The term LGBTQIA2S+ refers to the inclusion of sexual minorities that do not view themselves as cisgender individuals. The community in this video will be referred to as LGBTQ+ for reasons of convenience and not underrepresentation. Since the 1990s, Korea is a country that has been able to fully reap the merits of rapid globalization. Korea's economic potential, governmental influence, and social-cultural identity have been spreading throughout the world in recent years, while also being largely impacted by outside influences as well. Despite such transitions, sexual minorities and their human rights have been pushed outside of the circle of positive influences. Through this video, we would like to address why the LGBTQ+ community in Korea will take at least a decade to achieve recognition as a legal identity from the government and society based on the progression the LGBTQ+ community has achieved in social conception, media representation, and legal and political representation. The political and social rights of sexual minorities are a relatively new concept in Korea. The issue of sexual minorities and their human rights subject was first introduced in an academic format in the year 2000 through a publication named Everyday Oppression and Minority Rights by the Korean Human Rights Foundation. It outlined how the military, mass media, educational systems, and the court of law denied the acknowledgement towards gay rights in Korea. Though it has been 2 decades since the release of this fact, Korea is still unchanged and walking on a treadmill. The first resistance towards gay rights and also the roots of the gay rights movement is believed to have begun in the 1980s. The military authoritarianism and the political conditions that oppress democratic ideas have discouraged any sort of minority rights and activism, including those of sexual minorities. The military regime conditioning the society to adopt neo-Confucianism that strongly emphasized gender hierarchy, duty, and family as key priorities were thought to be a threat if the binary concept of gender was to be broken. With the reconstruction of democracy in the 1990s, the gay rights movement in Korea and forms of political activism began to take form. Gay and lesbian organizations began the publication and circulation of Buddy and 또 다른 세상 that promoted self-identity as homosexuals while criticizing bias and discrimination in Korean society. In addition, an umbrella organization, the Organization of Homosexual Human Rights Movement of Korea, was established to formulate the advancement and representation of common agendas for the LGBTQ+ as an undeniably important human rights issue. The social movements for the sexual minority communities were based on 2 main fronts. First, to fight against the bias represented in mass media, textbooks, and the government's AIDS policy in which the homosexual population is perceived as a group of promiscuous, hedonists, and AIDS-spreading aliens hiding in the corner of society. Secondly, to establish the legal status of homosexuals that will allow the sexual minorities to also pertain dignity and protection of the law like all other citizens. All this began with the gay community first trying to establish protection for gay men within the military. Homosexual members in the military were subjected to discrimination, physical and mental abuse, and suspicion as potential sex offenders. Though the military states that psychological counseling and medical treatments are available to all those in need of these, it is extremely dangerous for gay servicemen or draftees to seek help because the protection of privacy is frequently violated. Once senior officers are notified of such information, they would notify their parents of this matter without consent and are often forcefully taken to the hospitals for intensive mental care that sometimes included HIV tests. Some homosexual men who fear such situations and wish to be discharged for medical reasons would have to submit hard evidence, such as photos or videos of their involvement in sexual acts with another male.
Within the mass media and education sector, activists have been trying to correct any sort of materials that would provide negative implications about sexual minorities. Until April 2004, Article 7 of the Enforcement Ordinance of Young Protection Commission, which majorly determined what could be shown on the mass media and in the school materials, homosexual behavior was listed as a socially unacceptable act along with intercourse with animal orgy and incest. Reports in magazine and newspaper also usually deal with gays and lesbians being involved in promiscuous secret parties. As a countermeasure, even since the year 2000, gay rights activists have reached out to teachers and students to organize cultural and academic forums on campus to distribute informational materials in an attempt to enhance youth awareness and eliminate grueless homophobia. One of the largest and still yet heavily criticized events ever created from this period is the Queer Cultural Festival or the Rainbow Parade, which has become an annual event ever since the year 2000. Ever since the start of the movement, it is true that much has been improved in the representation of sexual minorities in Korea. However, there is still so much to go in achieving equal rights and equal dignity for the LGBTQ+ community. While the National Assembly did not put any effort into the anti-discrimination bill for the queer community, some local governments, especially those heavily controlled by the Democratic Party, tried to put into action local anti-discrimination bills. Mayor Park Won-sun of Seoul pledged to enact a human rights bill that would include the protection for sexual minorities back in 2012. However, shortly after a meeting with the Evangelical Christians in December 2014, he claimed that he did not support sexual minorities and that he will never push for the bill. The Christian Council of Korea is one of the largest and most influential alliances of churches in Korea that is also the primary opponent of queer rights in Korea. When President Roh Moo-hyun added in anti-discrimination legislation in 2007 that prohibited discrimination in the areas of employment and education on the basis of sex, gender, religion, disability, age, social status, region of origin, ethnicity, physical condition, marital status, political opinion, and sexual orientation, the evangelical Christian groups are the ones that protested and called in all the offices who agreed with the bill and demanded it be removed, which at the end is exactly what happened.
Coming to recent years, in 2017, former President Moon Jae-in stated on live TV that he didn't like homosexuality and continued that even America, an advanced country that advocates human rights, legalized same-sex marriage only recently. Our society has not yet reached a consensus on same-sex marriage. On the very same day, a queer individual that confronted former President Moon was labeled as a multi-gay terrorist or rainbow terrorist by Moon supporters. The confrontation and such labeling demonstrate how still in this current society the queer community is treated as a threat to national security by law and social implication and representation. In 2021, a Korean man filed a lawsuit against the National Health Insurance Service after the agency canceled his coverage under the insurance program of his male partner's employer. In January of this year, the court played for the side of the National Health Insurance Service and was ruled over. The Seoul court ruled against the same-sex couple, stating that spousal health insurance is only applied to heterosexual couples. As such, to this day, the LGBTQ+ community lacks legal and social protection. Some shows, such as Mary Queer, exist in South Korea, and celebrities like Holland and Hong Seok-jeon have enhanced the social representation of the queer community. There is still a long way to go in order to catch up with other progressive countries. According to a report titled Survey of the Social Desires and Actual Life Condition of Young Gender and Sexual Minorities, 41.5% of the survey respondents reported contemplating suicide in the past year, and 8.2% reported having attempted suicide. 9 out of 10 Korean LGBT people, so 97%, say that South Korea is not a good country for sexual minorities. In conclusion, the LGBTQ+ community in Korea will take at least a decade to achieve recognition as a legal identity from the government and society, as one can clearly see the lack of rightful social conception, media representation, legal and political representation.